Tracy Hoffman.
My name is Tracy Hoffman, and I served on the Superintendent Search Community Interview Panel. I'm deeply concerned about the integrity and transparency of the Superintendent Search process. I'm concerned that the process has been and is being manipulated in an unethical manner. My sense of unease with the search process goes back to late February, when a group of parents met with Dr. Brann to discuss a very specific topic. It instead turned into a meeting in which Dr. Brann was selling himself as a candidate for permanent superintendent. He handed out his 6-page resume to each of us. He spoke for nearly an hour about his past experiences and accomplishments. He touted himself as having the ability to keep board members on control, and even said, quote, "I'm keeping Mrs. Menchaca on a short leash," unquote. My misgivings multiplied when I learned during that same meeting that Dr. Brann is not only affiliated with, but is a partner with the COSCA Group, the firm conducting San Gabriel Unified Superintendent Search. According to the professional practice guidelines of the Association of Executive Search Consultants, a search firm has the ethical obligation to avoid conflicts of interest with their client. It was therefore highly inappropriate for a partner of the COSCA Group to be campaigning for the permanent position. I began to view the process more favorably when our board voted 4-0 to allow an open search with a community interview panel, and even more so when I learned that Dr. Brann had not applied for the position. It seemed that our district was truly following through on its promise of more transparent processes. After what seemed like a very effective and open interview process, the board voted 5-0 to offer the superintendent position to an eminently qualified candidate. Then, late last week, rumors spread like wildfire that the candidate who had been offered the position, Russel Lee Sung, had inexplicably and suddenly withdrawn his name from consideration. I don't know the reason for his withdrawal, but my gut reaction was that something went horribly wrong with the process. Now there are individuals putting Don Brann forward as a candidate for filling the permanent superintendent position. This definitely feels like backhanded, backroom dealing. Why would we be so quick as to dismiss the open and transparent process? There were several qualified candidates who applied. With no disrespect meant to Dr. Brann, there are several compelling reasons why he should not be considered a viable candidate for the permanent position. His position with the COSCA Group presents a blatant conflict of interest. Appointing him while dismissing the open search process gives the perception of backroom dealing. He didn't even apply for the position, which means that he was not subject to the same evaluative process as every other applicant. He's already serving as the VP of the Da Vinci Schools Board of Trustees. Don't we deserve a full-time dedicated superintendent? And lastly, not insignificantly, Dr. Brann would be coming out of retirement. We've already had an interim superintendent found by the COSCA Group who came out of retirement to become our permanent superintendent. How well did Dr. Susan Parks work out for our district? We deserve a full-time superintendent with an interest in serving the district for an extended period of time. Can I just finish the last thing? 30, not even. I strongly urge the board to remain committed to open and transparent processes. Please consider the other viable candidates from the current applicant pool, and if necessary, reopen the search for a permanent superintendent. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Hussein, and I'm reading this on behalf of my mom who's here tonight, Laura Hussein. This statement represents her opinion and not those of her employer or any other organization that she's affiliated with. Dear governing board members, recently I served on the committee that was selected to assist with the hiring of a new superintendent. This committee was formed by you, the governing board, and represented a broad spectrum of individuals in the district. I was very pleased with the work that was done by this committee and the conversations that ensued with the governing board. In the end, there were 2 very qualified candidates that were selected for final interviews, and one was offered the position based on a 5-0 vote by the governing board. It is now my understanding that the individual offered the position has withdrawn. While it is extremely disappointing that this has occurred, it is important that the board stay the course and not take shortcuts in the hiring process of the new superintendent. There are 3 ways to respond to this withdrawal. 1, make an offer to the runner-up. 2, start the process over. Or 3, act in a hasty manner and select someone who may appear to be a good candidate, but who has not been properly evaluated. The district hired the COSCA Group to perform the search for our superintendent. Throughout the process, the community was informed that the interim superintendent, Don Brann, a principal of the COSCA Brann, was not a candidate and he did not apply for the position. While Dr. Brann has performed well as an interim superintendent, It was important to many of us that he not be considered, as there was a perceived conflict of interest. In fact, according to the Association of Executive Search Firms, AESC, if a member search firm wishes to have an outplacement division, that is to say interim candidates, there must be a Chinese wall between the two divisions. To quote AESC, this is because the real essence of retained executive search is not mere recruiting, but rather evaluation, comparative evaluation of all appropriate candidates. If the search firm also does outplacement, and if one of the outplacement candidates appears to match the specifications for a search assignment being conducted by the same firm, then the search firm would have a conflict of interest in comparing that candidate to other candidates. I've heard from several different SGUSD employees that Dr. Brann has been advocating for himself as a candidate throughout the process, even though he never applied. Let me repeat that. Dr. Brann never applied for the position. I've also heard that there were certain individuals and board members who have been actively advocating for Dr. Brann as well, even after an offer was made. Furthermore, it is rumored that this board is going to be considering naming him as permanent superintendent without a vetting process. I find this unacceptable. Not because Dr. Brann is not a qualified candidate, but for the very reason that the board would be violating the very specific hiring process that was established by the board. It is my opinion that the COSCA Group has not conducted itself in an independent manner nor carried out its fiduciary responsibility to SGUSD. As a principal of the COSCA Group, Dr. Brann should have been forbidden from advocating for himself and disrupting the process. This is now a failed search. Due to the conflict of interest, if the COSCA Group is going to continue as a search firm to find a candidate, then Dr. Brann will need to recuse himself as a candidate.
Good evening. I wasn't planning to speak tonight. I walked in the middle of Mr. Ammon's remarks. I'm an English teacher at Gabrielino, and all I really want to say is this is taking a toll. This is taking a big toll. And I'm not really interested in why any of this happened, but I'm interested in what's going to happen now. It's a shame. It's just all this dissension is ripping people apart. And I was so heartened by the fact that it seemed like this 15-member panel, and I applied to be on the panel, and I was only disappointed for a moment that I didn't get picked because it seemed like they did such a authentic, good job of searching and interviewing the 6 candidates, and it seemed like the board was working together so well. I was thrilled when I read in the paper that it was a 5-0 decision, and I'm just stunned. I'm stunned. So I had hope and I have faith that the authenticity of the process, which happened the first time, will continue. I guess I don't know anything about politics and I don't know the way these things work, but you know, the 15-member panel interviewed 6 people. I assume there was a second choice. If he or she is willing to take the job, I guess logic would assume, great. If not, I have faith and I trust that there'll be authenticity. Like I was so excited that there seemed to be. Thanks for listening to me.
Good evening. I'll just make my comments brief. At Faculty Appreciation Day, we were given a license plate frame that said students first. Teachers don't need to be reminded of this, but some of you might. Thank you.
Sylvia Mata-Pacheco.
Good evening. I just want to say what a wonderful graduation we had last week.
Yeah.
I want to really thank Gabrielino High School and all its staff for a wonderful graduation. Despite all the dysfunction, the children remain resilient. The staff remains resilient. The community remains resilient. And I'm a little upset, Mr. Brann, I was included in those like little committees of yours because, you know, we have a voice here, the Latinos in this community. School board members take oath to serve all children in San Gabriel with integrity and honesty. Boards of education act only as a whole and only during public meetings. A school board is a corporate body and has power only during public meetings. To abuse such powers is a betrayal of trust the community placed upon each elected member. In the case of the superintendent search, it was understood by the school community and the community at large that the members of the community would participate in the selection of the superintendent. We all agreed there would be a process. Consultants are paid to keep the process moving along. To deviate from the plan defiles the trust I once had in the process and in this board. In order to maintain the integrity of the office of superintendent and to move forward and not get caught up in, once again, another political power play, my family supports the return to the process and the use of a selection committee in the selection of our next superintendent. Thank you.
Moving on to special presentations and acknowledgments, we have a presentation on the refunding and sale of bonds by Piper Jaffrey, Ivory Lee.